No, people say, what are the skill sets that you need to be an entrepreneur? And then shockingly say, there is no entrepreneur.
That's interesting. So I would say we're basically in the third phase of kind of teaching, from basically professor direct frontal teaching to case studies to now this immersive experience.
And then, so what do we do? For example, every 2 weeks we do a founders meetup, right? Where it's in the evening. It's all of this, by the way, is non for credit, because what we find is people in course settings oftentimes worry way too much about credit.
That now I obviously have to ask you, isn't AI going to change that completely? And wouldn't that take it to the next level?
To me, my call to action still is, in the digital, in the software world, we need to be so much better, right? I find that now with AI and so, unfortunately, there we're not in the strongest position in Europe. And that's, I think, is non-sustainable as such.
Sometimes I see advertising like Learn AI, which makes me in a way laugh. How can you prepare for an AI world? And maybe both like before university and then in university, what does it actually mean to learn AI? Hello, welcome to the AlpMomentum Podcast. And I'm very happy to welcome Professor Jan Brinckmann here today from ESADE. So welcome, Jan. Great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much. It's a huge pleasure, I must say, Mickey. I'm a big fan of yours for a really long time. We know each other from the, I think, Berlin days, and really great what you do.
Absolutely. It's also a great pleasure. I've been looking so much forward to this conversation and can just say the same about you. So let's just jump straight into it. Jan, you are a professor, you are an entrepreneur, you are an investor. How would you describe your job or what you do best? And can you take us a little bit on the journey? What do you do currently?
Sure. I mean, I was had always this academic track that just happened to be developing. And I think that is based on my last name, which for German guys is like a professor in the Black Forest clinic, which some might remember. So even in high school, I was called the professor based on that funny show. And I always had a passion as well. I love the university context. I love the studying, the learning, exploring stuff. I love as well communicating about topics that one finds exciting. I personally say other people watch soccer and like to talk about soccer. My passion project is entrepreneurship and startups. And they're the wonderful people that move these forward. And then, here and there as well, I try not just to talk about things, but I think as well, it's really you learn by doing and by being involved. So for me, it was always important as well to be involved, to meet exciting people, exchange ideas, and help people build companies.
Fantastic. I mean, first of all, of course, congratulations to the continuous great placing of ESADE in the Redstone University Startup Index. We measure the efficiency of universities in creating startups and spinning out. ESADE is literally one of the lighthouses and really great examples for how you can create a lot of startups out of a university. Could you maybe briefly describe your university, like location, size, etc., for people that maybe are not so familiar with it?
Yes. So ESADE is one of the private business schools. So we have a foundation, non-for-profit foundation behind it. We really follow the international business school model, which I think is very interesting because I think many people in Europe come and are used to the classical university setup. I think in the business school model, it's way more about as well the search for relevance and practice. And they're very early. That was like in the mid 2000s, I would describe it. ESADE internationalized a lot to give people a perspective, right? Because I'm here in Barcelona. We have around about in most programs, 95% international students. So in a class, a normal cohort class are maybe 60 some students. That's actually quite common. And there we have maybe 2 or 3 from Spain, and the rest is from all over the world.
Wow, so you're probably one of the most international business schools.
Absolutely, yeah. That's actually in the Financial Times ranking. When you look at the different dimensions, normally we're scoring really internationally at one of the top places in terms of internationality.
What, apart from being super international, which I'm sure is an amazing experience for everybody who attends. What would you say, what's the philosophy of ESADE? What sets it apart from others? And maybe you can take us a little bit on the journey, like how is the university run, etc.
Exactly. So, I mean, fundamentally speaking, I would say we are very strongly inspired by the US business school model, right? Where you don't have these chairs that normally, like traditionally, right? In Europe, you had a chaired professor that then has his whole institute and there's like all these hierarchies that I would argue doesn't exist as much in the classical business schools in the US. You do have different levels of professors, but then as well, depending on the culture, these levels don't really in practice don't really mean that much, right? So what we then care for is really the teaching and the learning experience. And here as well, I think there's as well is quite a difference. While in a classical university, it's really all about research, and then to really play in the top research field, researchers have to dedicate their lives almost exclusively to this research. And that means as well in teaching, it's so much based on research and the models in research. And so it becomes a very arguably theoretical experience. And for us, I'd say a hallmark is that in the classroom experience, which for us is very important because as well, no, we are a private institution. And for us as well, for example, we depend on tuition fees, right? The teaching and the learning experience needs to be superb and relevant. And it's not so much judged based on academic, basically bringing the research into the classroom, but more creating learning environments and experience environments that enable basically a transformation of the person.
Could you give maybe a few examples of that? And then also, what can people study, like, or what major subjects? I mean, in which directions do people later go?
Totally, yeah. No, so first, like, just to highlight a little bit the teaching experience and the learning experience. So I find most people are used to this structure and think that's university, where a professor comes in, says something, like has some models and some frameworks in mind, and people can basically take notes and memorize these notes, right? I think from there on, people found, well, that's maybe not as effective. Then there was this development coming strongly, for example, from Harvard, right, with business cases. Hey, rather than teaching some frameworks or even theory and empirical models, go right in, let's have a decision context, and then let's make people experience this context and make decisions, and they learn basically inductively by making these decisions, and then maybe at the end you have some frameworks. And I think from there on, the next level was, well, Harvard cases and doing a lot of cases interesting, but maybe actually we need to move even further to practice and do real projects, right? And then, so then there was like the stream on the real project. And to me, taking that to the next level, right? Because it's always the question as to what's next, is for me, it's still very different when you have a real project where basically students do project work compared to when you actually go there. So you as a very successful founder and investor, if you come to class and tell people what it's like and they work on a case, that's one thing. But if we can come to your office and get this immersive experience, and on top of it, we analyze the businesses that you invest in, and what your approach is. I think that creates an even more impactful experience. And that's what I mean, right? It's quite a long journey from professor coming in, maybe arguably here and there somewhat disconnected to the practice and saying this is an important theory. Why? Because I guess we as a research community say that, to all the way saying, no, we want to learn from the best. We want to have them in classroom. We want to work on real cases, but as well, we want to have immersive experiences where we'll actually go to you.
That's interesting. So I would say we're basically in the third phase of kind of teaching, from basically professor direct frontal teaching to case studies to now this immersive experience. So and that now I obviously have to ask you, but isn't AI going to change that completely? And wouldn't that take it to the next level?
Yes and no. I think AI is an absolute game changer on so many levels, right? I think as people learn, right now you can have your notebook LLM set up for these different concepts. And in fact, so I would actually encourage that. So for my international entrepreneurship course, I have a section already like on born globals ready to deploy where people can then play around with it. They learn the tools hands on and they can have some discussions. But for me as well, this is only one part of it. While again, we're back to the real cases. And when people have these real and immersive cases, indeed, they can use AI, right? So to me, AI as a tool set, as a practice set is very, very powerful. To give you another idea, right now I'm working with, he's actually the former head of different, let's say, the top education tools at Google from Mountain View. He's working together with me on how can we create something on top, not for credit. So it's not about the classical ECTS system, how we can enable the participants to become basically AI natives and state of the art using AI in their practice, in their professional practice, where we actually measure the performance based on how did the behavior of the person that takes part in these activities change afterwards. So not here, I would say AI is a whole space, is a tool set. And for me in education, it offers a huge opportunity to make humans just, let's say, more productive, more reflective, more critical, more analytical, whatever.
If I mean, there sometimes I see advertising like "Learn AI," which makes me in a way laugh. But how can you prepare from an AI world, and maybe both like before university and then in university? What does it actually mean to learn AI?
Yes. So I think it has different dimensions to it. No, one is overall, and that's relatively foundational, is how do the AI models actually work? What were the breakthroughs? So looking a little bit under the hood, how does that actually work? Which I think is important for context.
And
but
you're
then
teaching
you have,
that?
Yes, I'm personally not, because I'm not
that is not it.
founding, but he would, no, so his name is Isham Anwar. He would, for example, teach that. And we have other professors that have that knowledge and teach that. And then as well, we have the application layer, right? For example, one is how can I use AI now as a personal coach for me, right? Like, what do I want to achieve? How can I become a better professional? And then I can learn how to use these AI tools. And then it comes down to me, even fundamental game changers, but I think they are so powerful, they are game changers. How should we have meetings? How should we record these meetings? How do we deal with the content? How do we take notes, right? I was always like very excited about note taking because I felt people are still taking very linear notes, meaning, there's a chapter, right? An idea like much like the old professor, it's on entrepreneurial marketing. So I take my notes on that where I say, no, when I have a conversation with you, the learnings are multidimensional. So my note-taking style needs to be multidimensional. That means, for example, I would suggest you need to take tags. You need to use hashtags for all kinds of insights and context. That makes it as well actually retrievable later on. Now, with the AI world, it gets even more exciting because all of a sudden you have vectorized basically nodes, right? Where everything becomes completely interdependent, completely independent of, let's say, one content relating to the other one. And that's, I think, the core idea is we have to get the nodes virtually into this vector space to make it accessible.
Very interesting. Now, I could argue all of that is good, but why do I need a university for that? I mean, there are now a lot of people that argue maybe the whole system of colleges, of university is overcome and people just actually should learn by doing. And there are so many tools, so many help. And I mean, this will exponentially increase. So why do I still need institutions like ESADE?
Yes. So I think what is oftentimes misunderstood, and I think there was a wave there. There was a lot of, let's say, initial euphorics around this wave when we had this COVID wave of digital learning, right? I have these MOOCs and I get all these knowledge pills and MOOCs. And I think one thing first to understand as well is really what is really university education. So while I was talking about some elements, and the problem is almost like we're so short on time with all of these, because all of these as well are pretty multi-dimensional, right? Is no, so it's I say there maybe in one precise picture, humans are not chickens. And education is not feeding knowledge pills to chickens, right? It is a very important dimension to learn relevant tools very effectively. No, we talked about this immersively, but it's way more than that. So for me, like, and why do universities and so have these staying powers? Why don't just digital contents solve it and then we're done? For me, is basically, and no, it's kind of like we are humans that do a journey through life, right? And there, I think we all can agree that went to the university education, this experience that you have at the university goes way beyond what you learned in a single class, right? It's really much about having time to reflect on yourself. Like even this being on campus, to me, being on campus, I'm a big fan of actually, no, humans need the physical interaction still to meet people in person, to have this exchange. It's so much better than just online, right? I think online is okay to have some sessions online, but I really, Michi, I like to see you in person as well. I love when I come to, let's say, Munich or Berlin, we can meet up in person. Why? Because it's another level of depth of interaction of humans, right? Where we're used to this physical interaction. And I think that's important. I'm quickly highlighting a few more things that I think are very important. One is as well the social selection, unfortunately, right? And that is, I think people that have a passion for learning, for exploring, for discovery, they want to go, they self-select into university settings. And it's great to have this cohort of people together there. I think that's not so easily replicatable, let's say, by just saying, okay, why don't we just create Zoom groups where we all get together? I guess you can, but I think it's still different when you come physically on class. We've really seen COVID for many, unfortunately, of our students was quite a shocking experience. And they really wish to come back to, let's say, to the classroom to have this full experience, to as well go on study tours, to have these immersive experiences, etc. And there's more to it, right? And there's networking regarding getting into the dream job, right? It's about analytical, like how do you develop your thinking? I think there's a lot of things to education, right?
But the question then would be, I mean, obviously universities are, at least the private, are quite expensive. So the question is it worth it? Second one is, couldn't you argue that a lot of this kind of human interaction, by the way, if that's the real value of a university today, aren't then a lot of the rankings measuring the wrong thing that are still very much tailored to the kind of traditional world of universities? But couldn't you then say, hey, maybe, for example, if whatever I want to do, then I do that already, and I have like an AI co-pilot, and I have maybe a group within a company or in an accelerator or in a group of companies that get seed financing of founders, whatever the setting is, or in a group of motivated artists. And then I have these AI co-pilots, and then I'm even like, basically, you can't even distinguish between a job and the immersive experience. Wouldn't that be then the next level? And then why do you need a university for that? Then maybe couldn't maybe provocatively said, companies offer kind of starter classes of new job applicants and say, hey, you can work on the job, but in parallel, you also have these education co-pilots, and you build your network and your kind of, I don't know, Siemens and SAP and whatever mafia.
Yes. So I think, I mean, there was like a whole host of questions. So one could regard the pricing, right, of business schools and private business schools and being quite expensive. And there, I'm with you. There is like something like a high price tag to that. Having said that, though, I think it's always relatively relevant or relative, right? One is, for example, if you invest, you're a business angel, I'm a business angel. I think oftentimes for you and me, a single investment is way more than all your education costs combined, right? And then the question is to me is, okay, would I if I have that education, I have it for life, would I want that? Considering that's one of many, I most likely say, hey, I would still want to get that top education, and other things come with it, like the network, obviously, and many other things. So if we do like I'm not a big fan of discounted cash flows, but here that you might get a positive value. But having said that, and that maybe is as well as I think is very important to realize, it's not a guaranteed ticket, right? It's not that you cannot say, hey, I pay this fee, I'm part of this group. To me, as people that are on fire, they will take a lot out of all of these experiences, let's say. And people, unfortunately, that are not so on fire and that just want to go and get that basically just that brand, I think that's, for me personally as well, that's very frustrating. And I think that's not fair and that's not actually very productive. Maybe they should choose another way. And another core thing that, which for me as well is very important here for Europe, because this is as well really European podcast. I think what we really need to make sure in Europe is we need to have a very strong public education system. I think it should not be just that the innovation is happening in some schools, in some public universities. It should be across the board. Really everybody, each professor, everybody working in designing programs should ask ourselves, what's really the next level? How can we design a much more impactful system? And I think that we have really a big upside.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we measured with the Redstone University Startup Index. We measured the efficiency of universities to create startups, but then also measured like the difference between different institutions. And I wouldn't have thought how big the gap is even between institutions that structurally are very similar. So even if you have a very similar subjects, technical university, similar budget, etc., and still one creates in the end 10 times more startups per, let's say, 100 million euro budget that the university has than another one. So I'm 100% with you. It's probably one of the areas where Europe has the largest opportunity to create a future and also autonomy and technical advancement if we translate better the research and the great education and teaching. So we have like IP, we have knowledge in the heads of the professors, the PhDs, the students, and then well-educated people. And if we help them to better kind of translate that into products and companies. Speaking of that, what is ESADE doing? How would ESADE help somebody who says, hey, I want to start a startup, or I'm thinking about, I want to be a founder? Do you have any special programs, any special setups?
Absolutely. No, and we do a lot. And let me get to that. Fundamentally speaking, maybe one upfront, because I think there's even many people out there that think, hey, can you really teach entrepreneurship? Or aren't you just like, no, certain people, they just have it. They have that fire, they have the energy, and you can sense it right away when you meet them that they are entrepreneurs. And to me, fundamentally speaking, just for people, because I think then people can see it, I would say if we model it, it's basically my job, my head as a director of an entrepreneurship program at ESADE would be, I have to create entrepreneurial behavior, right? So that means I want to achieve that humans act entrepreneurially. To me, that has three main components. One is a human does something if she or he wants to do something. So I need to focus a lot on the want. I think too often in business schools and other educational offerings, we jump right into the how to, like how should you do this? How should you do market research? How should you do pricing? How should you do product? But without even addressing the what do you want? And I think humans in general are really on the search for what do I want to do in life? And I think that as well is a very important dimension of university education. So we focus a lot on the want. And there, can you influence the want? To me, the most impactful way that I found to influence the want is humans are inspired by other humans. And that is wonderful people like Michi. Thank you. You have been oftentimes a special guest in these different educational offerings that we do. But beyond, well, getting really entrepreneurs into the classroom, going to entrepreneurs, going to their offices, that is really so inspiring. I have many people that before said, I never thought even that this would be a way for me. I always thought there are these little startups, and all of a sudden I find this seems to be like super cool lives, right? So first, focus on the want, and there's activities that we can do to empower the want. The second one up is, so now I have a person that wants to do something, but then it's like, oh, I want to be a great soccer player, but I don't know how to. So we need to focus on how do you actually, for example, start companies, right? And I think it cannot be very, let's say, academic. It has to be very actionable, right? What are the steps? Not saying this will always work. So there needs to be an understanding of likelihoods and all of that. But fundamentally speaking, these are the rough steps. And with a certain likelihood, we can get from here to there. And there I would say as well is it's not really the know-how that the person needs to have, because arguably you can only have the know-how after you've done things like riding the bicycles. You cannot say, I know how to ride a bicycle if you've never ridden a bicycle. But we can basically fundamentally say, okay, let's start a project. It's not a full bicycle, but it's a little bit, it moves like a bicycle. Let's jump on it and let's moving. And hence we learn already like the core things that it takes. And to me, the really important thing for educators here is we need to generate the belief in the how to. If people believe that they can, that's when they become active, right? So we call it cognition science self-efficacy, the belief that you can, which is an artifact, right? It doesn't really exist. So focusing on this belief. For example, here, shocking for some, I say, like legal topics, oftentimes I say, don't worry so much about legal topics. Go to specialized lawyer in Munich, in Berlin, in Barcelona, in New York, wherever, in Amsterdam. And then you get this part set. So there you don't need to be the specialist, right? Same with accounting. Don't worry about accounting. That shocks many people. They feel overwhelmed. They don't understand it, right? So as well, simplifying things and focusing on the essential. I'm using a lot of 80-20 rules there. What at the end of the day, yes, you can do this and yes, you can do that. But knowing what is the most important is really key to get started. And that people feel, yes, I see the big picture. I know what I need to focus on now. And that was the second element. So now we have a person that wants to do stuff. We have somebody that feels like, hey, I can do it. And now to me is still a lot of latency, or people, I would call them couch entrepreneurs. We all have a wonderful life. We all sit on this wonderful couch. Life's good no matter what, right? So now, which I think is part of the hardest thing for let's say, universities and educators, is we have to get people off that comfortable couch into the action. And there I say, don't create companies, start projects. So we have to just get started on small projects just to move people, get people into the moving. So here I say, for example, that we have this Master in Innovation Entrepreneurship, where I'm the academic director. There I say, hey, in the entrepreneurship course, this is not about the credits that you need for the course. Don't focus on this. Make this as a challenge. We have now 2.5 months. I want to see, if you want to, that you start a real project. I think that works. This is one trigger. So it's like, I call this the triggering moments to start project. But the problem is one trigger has a certain likelihood to be successful. So what I think is very important is we need to have multiple triggers. That means we have another course running in parallel. It's called the Exploring the Opportunity. And there virtually the challenge is they get credit for, and it's a challenge, who generates the most revenue at the end of the course, right? And this is just is a pure action-based, if you so kind of strange academic setting, but basically, and you can always rationalize it as the cognitive level, it's to train people that action and learning by doing is just as legitimate as doing a lot of studies. So, but it's these three elements, right? So wanting to do things that we need to work on, the know-how and the belief in the know-how, and then providing a lot of triggering moments that we can get people into the action. And then, so what do we do? For example, every 2 weeks we do a founders meetup, right? Where it's in the evening. It's all of this, by the way, is none for credit, because what we find is people in course settings oftentimes worry way too much about credit. So we say, so for people that just want to explore stuff, just want to see if there's something for me, come to the ESADE founders meetup. And it's not just for founders, it's as well for people that are just interested in exploring. And then we have people, for example, like people that started companies, people as well at times that failed with companies, people that struggle. But we take it very informally. I'm never the professor, whatever, like very formally. I'm always young, and I'm just exploring together with another person their journey through life. And then after that, people can pitch their ideas. We just say, just pitch your crazy ideas, just considering like who knows, and then kind of maybe suggesting some steps, which there we normally say, nobody knows if your idea will work or not. There's only one person, that's the customer. And then kind of, okay, how many customers, and all of that. And then, yeah, it's a lot of just networking, right? That people meet, because there's a lot of randomness as well. Sorry, that was long.
No, that's totally amazing. I love it. Like and I think actually the same concept could actually be even applied to companies. If you want to develop people, your colleagues, your employees, because everybody says, okay, I teach them something. That's what they want to do. But like basically on what they want, what's the end game? What's your target? Where do you want to go to? And then the how. But I love it also that you say it's not only about what you actually and how you need to do it, but giving people the belief. I think this is a very different concept and mindset, which I have now interviewed a few people. I have never heard that, so that's quite amazing. And then also the trigger, and that you say, okay, how do I trigger? But not only one, but different trigger points, so that in the end I maximize the probability that people do what they actually want, and I help them on their path. I help them to get off the couch. It's like, how do you get the best version of yourself? How can you become the dream version? And I also like what you said, like this, what I've heard also often, and I think this is a common theme, that examples and people who have done it, who share their stories, this is so powerful. And seeing an experience in itself.
And always the tone matters as well a lot, right? And not putting people on a pedestal or so, but really like this human thing. No, to me, it needs to feel like we're having a coffee with a friend. I think learning happens when it feels like we're having a chat with a friend. And I think in universities, actually, we're making it wrong oftentimes, and in companies as well, where we're creating like this formal you. We put people in a role where it's like, hey, would you talk to your friend like that when you learn, when you discuss things? And I think maybe as well here in the Scandinavian cultures, or for example, the Israeli culture, right? At times it's a little bit different because they actually focus on not creating so much hierarchies between people.
Absolutely. Now, out of these courses, who have been the most successful entrepreneurs that you have taught?
Which to me is actually, I think here I'm revealing, and in this podcast we might revealing a quite surprising, maybe observation and so, but to my best knowledge, arguably the most successful, and there's various ways to measure success, right? But I take more of this classical, okay, let's say how big did this thing get and how much money actually in cash did somebody get for this. But I randomly stumbled across a student that was always very supportive. It's a female student. Her name is Andrea Lisbona, and she created Touchland. And basically, so she built up this, and she was pretty young when she started, like in her mid-20s. She first became a distributor of one of the biggest brands of these hand sanitizers in the US. Mm-hmm. She basically became the distributor. She hustled, being relatively young, become a distributor here in Spain. Then she distributed as well the product in other countries and so. And she really learned and thought, hey, this is kind of such an old school approach to how they basically, what even the category is and what the product is. What if we would create kind of, if I describe it like that, she has other words, right? But if I describe it, it's basically, she said, what if we would create the Apple version of this product? So, like Apple, the tech company. And so she basically created beautiful looking hand sanitizers with great aromas that were collectibles as well. And so the company completely went through the roof. I don't know the sales numbers. You have to look it up. It's touchland.com. But I just unread. I always study just for personal interest the Inc. 500 list, the list of now Inc. 5000, the fastest growing companies in the US based on 3-year revenue growth. So I was looking onto that list, and bam, what did I see right at the at the top line? It basically says Andrea Lisbona sold the company for 880 million. Considering that she didn't take many investment rounds and that it was largely a cash deal, I must say I don't think there are so many entrepreneurs here in Spain that could perform at that level. And I must say, really, while doing so, Andrea was always there, right? She was always really like whenever I asked people, hey, would you be so kind to come to class, offer a case or so, she would always help. So she's a rock star.
That's amazing. So somebody who is not only tremendously successful, but also closely associated to her alma mater. Very, very nice.
Absolutely. And she was
nice example. Would you say that while she was at ESADE, you could already kind of predict the success she would have? And maybe in a broader scheme, do you see commonalities or predictive traits of people that later on become hugely successful?
I mean, first of that, in terms of just timing, she was a bit right before I joined. So when I met her, basically, she was already like in the entrepreneurship space. So I didn't have her as a student, right? So it was slightly before, but I then closely saw her, like how she scaled it. I had her, I don't know how many times, as a guest speaker and so on. But if I look into the class, and maybe here, quick shout out to I'm a big fan, obviously, as well, of people that we say focus on high growth, high impact ventures, right? Like companies that really make it big and so. And one personal one there is Niklas Ratner. I don't know if you know him. He's the founder of Nelly Solutions, CEO. They basically they as well digitize the medical space and create a lot of like getting rid of inefficiency there. It's a very fast growing company. I think will be a very big one. And to me, people like him, you have him in class and you can clearly see that they stick out. Why would I say that? And how can you tell people that they stick out? And I imagine when you were in class, some professors picked up on that too. And that is some people are just so much on fire. You, it almost it screams like it. And these are not the ones that they always raise their hands. Also, that's kind of like then obviously that's more for the grades and so. Some people are on fire just because because they have a passion for, let's say, a field and what they do and how they think about it, and they're independent thinking. And then as well, they don't just think about it; they actually start something. I think this entrepreneurial energy is. You can sense it. And, let's say I have a group of 60 some. In a group like that, I think you always have 3 or 4 or so that clearly stick out. And even the cohort, the peers would as well, if I would ask them, hey, who do you think of this group sticks out? They would name the same names come up. By the way, I give you a very operational one for people that want to find those. If you are a guest speaker and come to class, you virtually can take who is the one from the students that is the fastest in connecting with the special guest on LinkedIn. To me, that metric, normally it's crazy, but it's like human behavior at times is very consistent, very interesting, very revealing. I think oftentimes gets it quite right. But it shows you basically, people are open and they follow up, they are on fire.
And do you think to this question, I got very different answers. Some say, no, you can't really predict it. Some say, yes, you can. Do you think there's actually an academic way to measure this kind of, passion, this being on fire? And then, because it's somewhat when somebody started it, then you have a lot more data points. The question is, can you predict it before somebody even started a project or a company, how and if this person will be successful?
And now the question is as well, to me, a little bit, what's success in general and so. And if I just quickly change my head and completely go right into the researcher's head as well, because there is a ton of research actually for sure. So I'm as well, when you see my research and my philosophy of research, I normally like meta-analysis. And that is, we take together, because I don't believe that individual studies as such can have the full power. Same, by the way, in medicine. You kind of have to statistically combine studies, and I'm not saying that answers then all the question, but kind of points a little bit to the direction. And in the space, I think there's a very clear, let's say, signal, and that is overall anything that has to do with human capital is actually quite a strong predictor. And to me, it makes sense as well, right? Because entrepreneurship is pretty broad; it's all over the place. But normally, the people that are investing a bit more in this, meaning in themselves, in education, in work, that they tend to have higher drive, and hence as well their performance is actually quite consistent. They could be better. They could become better academics. They could become better founders. They could become better lawyers, doctors, and so. It's just because they are more on fire and they're more open to learn. Arguably as well, they have relatively high levels of intelligence. Although as well, the question is if there's some kind of inverse U-shaped effect. I don't want to go too much into that. But fundamentally, I think it's that. And then maybe one part as well that I'm very enthusiastic about, and maybe to inspire people to think about that is, shockingly as well, I say people say, what are the skill set that you need to be an entrepreneur? And then shockingly say, there is no entrepreneur. And that is, we have to understand what the role of a human is in a company. For example, there's a CEO founder, the founder CEO. To me, very different profile normally than the founder CTO. It's just as much on the same level a co-founder, right? Very different if you're the co-founder product person, like your passion is clearly for product and that's what you care about most, versus co-founder, head of sales, head of performance marketing, right? So I think oftentimes we try to generalize. And so we ask ourselves, what is Elon Musk eating for breakfast? Believing that that's the general formula to find the successful traits, right? Where I say it's not about what hairdo he has or what he eats for breakfast. At the end of the day, it's about the job that he has to do. And then we have to identify what is actually his job description, if you so, which role does he fulfill in the company? And for me as well, for many people that are big fans of Elon Musk, be very careful which role he has, right? He has a very unique, very unusual role, actually. So he's not typically the one, I guess, that's the CEO organizing everything there. He runs different companies in parallel, which means he has to me, it's more like a face to the public. He's like pushing, he puts the energy by, he sets the goal as well. But then I imagine, I'm not that close to him, I imagine he has other people that are very, very good in actually landing the thing and managing the day-to-day and creating high-performance teams.
Absolutely. And I mean, he is from what he has achieved as an entrepreneur, probably nearly one in a century person, having built really landmark companies in many different areas, many times over and over again. So I like your example, probably by just eating the same, and maybe that's even counterproductive because I don't know how healthy he's eating, but
exactly. And some people as well, and this was I think in general to me and it has to do because often we love to follow a dream, right? And the idea now we see a successful person like him, and then we think we need to act exactly like him. And I think that can be very dangerous because to me, there actually we find entrepreneurship. And if I have, high performance CEOs, founder CEOs in mind, they are not all the same. There's actually quite different styles, right? I'm sure as well you can think of some CEOs, founder CEOs that are actually quite nerdy. They're not the best communicators, but they are analytically really bright. They really get this high conviction because they're very authentic, right? So what I want to say for people out there is don't just fall as well into the trap that there's one guy that obviously has performance, hence you have to be like them. Try to rather understand what's the job that the person needs to get done, and then figure out there's typically as well different ways to get it done.
I think you also always have to see it in the context of time, of social, economic environment, of the personal history of the person, of the type of company, product, etc. they are building. So I completely agree. The one trait, though, that I often see in common of people like entrepreneurs, but in general people who are successful, is an enormous curiosity in their personality. They want to constantly learn, understand, and develop. So that's probably one very common denominator that I find. But now, maybe, I mean, ESADE, a slightly different topic. We're in a world where a lot of the problems today are actually more physical than digital, and building basically more something around atoms than bits. How is ESADE doing there? And because one of the critique is that some of the business schools, in the end, and I'm completely exaggerating, but building just irrelevant companies for today's real problems.
Yes. Well, to me, it's a fascinating thing. I think what we need, let's say, in general, in all societies, is the development indeed. Like if I divide the world in two, and there's one is the digital world, and then there's the physical world. We need the powerful companies involved. I think that's is very apparent. Having said that, I find actually, earlier we had a little bit of discussion, and so I find that in Europe, we actually a little bit stronger, if I would benchmark ourselves, right? A little bit stronger typically in still the manufacturing, the physical world business. At least we have this, I think, a very strong base to build on as well further. To me, my call to action though still is in the digital, in the software world, we need to be so much better, right? I find that now with AI and so, unfortunately, there we're not in the strongest position in Europe. And that is, I think, is non-sustainable as such.
But
We
is
really
are for example, ESADE founders, are they also building some hardware kind of companies, or mainly you would say, I don't know, services, trading, and digital companies? Or what type of companies would you say people found?
No, for sure. So for sure, let's say now, people more with a business background in general, I think tend to gravitate towards more, let's say, software ventures, more execution focused ventures, and so hardware. I must say, and there as well, I must say, mea culpa. I'm as well predominantly my heart beats for digital tech solution and SaaS solution. So maybe as well that by the role models that we give, we need to be more broader for that one for sure. But we don't have there arguably as much touch points with the physical world, right? We tried different things because we don't have an engineering school, right? ESADE is a pure play business school with a law school. We don't have an engineering school. So what we try to do then is to think of it way more as a platform, right? In general, we say ESADE is more of a platform where we then bring together exciting, let's say, players that have the physical space. So, for example, we have the technical university. It's called the Polytechnica right next to us. We have been working and exploring collaborations with TUM, with ETH, with Aachen, right? To bring people together. But as well, to me, that is still something, let's say, on the roadmap on where we need to build something. We have not achieved, I think, in general, what can be done, and that is, I think the really powerful energy comes from people that are on fire with a passion, let's say, to build businesses, and bringing them together with people that have as well a passion to build, let's say, products, technology, solution, and this includes physical products. We tried different things like speed dating, working together on projects and so, but creating these matches is actually is quite tricky. It's not so easy, and I think we can do better. But by the way, I know I was doing some research at Stanford as well, and so even Stanford struggles like quite a bit, right? So you have the engineering school and you have the business school, and interestingly, kind of like it's not so let's say harmonious and so symbiotic as it should be. I think it still comes down to, I think on both sides, the engineering side needs to be way more open to the business side, and the business side needs to be way more open and way more passion for the engineering side.
That's a very interesting point, because I think that's probably one of the biggest leverages we would have also in Europe to create value if you put that together. And even in companies, the question is always, you have great engineers, inventors, etc. How do you build this, make this into products? Is there any format, anything where you say, okay, it's not perfect, but that's the best I have seen?
To me, it comes down to basically, again, these triggering projects, right? So that is starting projects that work out. So one thing that I've seen, and unfortunately, again, I'm citing now an example in the software space. But for example, there's this quite successful company here called Cantox. I mean, it was one of the big hits from Barcelona. And there was on a startup weekend, two guys that basically were business guys, had a business background. One was from ESADE, pitched an idea, found their software developer. They got lucky. The still the same CTO is still the CTO in the company, I think now, roughly speaking, 10 years later. So I think by bringing people together that are excited just to build projects over a short period of time, like a startup weekend or some other hackathon or some coding competition or some other random thing, I think can be super exciting. one idea, and I think that's is definitely on the roadmap. So we're experimenting and we're trying. Is for me, like if you ask me, what would you tell your students now? Like right now, we have the welcome week, right, for the studies for the new academic year. And to me, one really massive thing that I would say is now is the time to build. Just build. I think for a long time we were like thinking like, hey, let's do market assessments, let's do a validation of the pain, business model design, whatever. I think way quicker we need to jump into project and let's start building, and I think then we can figure out a lot of processes, and so in the process, a lot of issues in the process. And I think by building together different profiles, building together engineers and business people building together, I think that's when the power comes in.
Absolutely. Maybe one of the last questions. What at ESADE, what are your goals for the next 5 or 10 years? Where do you want to be there?
So overall, our goal is we want to be, if not the number one in Europe for entrepreneurship, right? That as a business school, that's our core anchor. And this has different dimensions, like that's excellence in the classroom, but really at the end of the day as well. We ask ourselves. We just did a strategic planning, let's say co-working session with the colleagues, and that was what does amazing? That was the question. What does amazing look like in the entrepreneurship space? So what do we need to offer to build that people would say, oh my God, that's amazing. I would have never thought that something like that is happening at a business school. And that I think that's the core question, the core challenge. What will be the big, amazing things in the next 5 years that we need to build? And it might be that it is, for example, I would find that super exciting that we build a platform across Europe of core people that build AI solutions, the hyperscalers, maybe it's not distributed models, whatever it is, across Europe, that we have a clear reference there. I'm not saying that it would be exclusive to ESADE, not at all. We see ourselves as a platform play. So whoever wants to build something in that space, we are there. We are very open. And we see it as, hey, let's start it out. Let's do experiments. Let's do projects, and let's see how far we can go.
Would that be something, if somebody listens and says, hey, I would be interested, then they should reach out to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be absolute. No, we prioritize that by activity. That would have absolute. So anything that's international, so by definition, pan-European, that has really high impact. I believe in Europe we need to move on par with the basically AI models and hyperscalers. We need to be there. We don't have any solution yet. Now, for example, we see how Oracle maneuvered their way back into the game. They're now top notch again, right? Brilliant move. Why don't we have these moves from these wonderful tech companies that we have here in Europe? We will be very honored and very happy if we can support it, if we can create a platform for exchange there as well to actually get stuff done. Another core question, the humanoids, right? Humanoid, there's a huge movement coming with physical products. We discussed humanoids. Why is it we have so many amazing engineering companies here in Europe? Why isn't there a platform to really scale that in terms of developing the language that coordinates that, the physical products, the components that it's needed, supply chains, and all of that? Anything that we can do, we are located in beautiful Barcelona. We have a view of the sea, which I think is always fantastic to bring people together. We are here not to really build things together. Would love to do that. Yeah.
Very cool. Very excited to see what's coming out there. One last question. What have been your most successful investments? I think you're also very, very unusual for a professor. Very, very active private investor, business angel.
Yes. The biggest ever, I guess, as well, depends how you measure it, cash on cash. That was luckily, I think there's not one clear outlier. There's different ones that each of them was wonderful. Some people know Pinterest. There I was basically a business angel. We sold a company. It got a nice kind of valuation on that now is public company. Redpoint was a wonderful success story. But then as well, First Stop Help is a doctor-on-demand platform. A PE bought it. It's public for 60% of it. It's a huge success story. To me as well, I'm very excited about SaaS Group, for example. Nelly Solutions. There's, I'd say, like overall, there's luckily a bunch that hopefully will have some relevance.
Amazing. And then, very, very last question. What does it give you as being a teacher, and where do you see any benefits?
Well, to me, and that was maybe like a game-changing moment. So I always did like this immersive part, like back in those days. That as well is where we met, early on. When I was doing my PhD, I want to be involved in this. I think just studying it from the outside is not enough. I want to be involved. So I kind of had this idea. I want to be like a consultant and have founders with marketing and sales. Right, that was like one idea. At one point, then that was through a connection. I was invited on the board of a, let's say, pretty exciting project, which was basically InfoJobs, as it was internationalizing. So we basically brought InfoJobs, which is the biggest job board here in Spain and Italy, into other countries. And one thing that I realized there was like, it's amazing the level of insights you get when you're like involved at that level, right? So really at the board level, at the closely working with the founders. And then in parallel, I think that a lot of stuff happened in parallel. It's maybe quite shocking as well. I, as an entrepreneurship professor, I didn't even know how this dynamic of business angel investment work. I didn't know, is there like a minimum, a maximum, whatever was in the US, and I didn't know how that works. And at one point, I just like started, and I think then it opened my eyes, like, oh my God, you can kind of look under the hood. You can actually see how it works, how these deals are structured, how you decide how to invest in all of that. And I think once that happened to me, it was so much fun. It was really like exciting. Some people think, this is now about maybe this one as well, because some people think, Jan has this deal from the university, so then he invests in his own students. I can tell you, the first student investment most likely was actually unique, and that was not my own student. Happened because she pinged me over LinkedIn, right? So for me, other than that, it was always like, I want to be out there in the space, right? And see what's going on. For me, wherever I am, and this would be a call to action for everybody. Try to reach out to people that you find, build something exciting, and build your own T-shaped domain expertise in an area. And then from there on, magical things happen. So for me, it's that. I want to always learn, hey, what is really the state of the art practice? And then from there on, then how can we help? How can we like think things like more at the level of 10x and just build exciting things.
Amazing.
And one thing I would say, sorry for that, is another core thing for me is always this mindset, and we're only getting started, right? Like for now, it has been pretty wild, right? But I would say, hey, this was nothing. This is like day zero, and now let's use everything we can to just a whole other level.
Absolutely. I think if I listen to you, your students can be very happy to have you. I actually also, I was a student of yours for the last hour. It was very inspiring. I learned quite a bit. So that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Jan, for being with us, and all the best, and really looking forward to catch up soon, and hopefully also in person.
Thank you. Absolutely, Michi. I'm a big fan of yours. Thanks so much for what all you do to as well to move the ecosystem forward. And yeah, everybody out there, you got to make it real. Build it now. Build.
Absolutely. With that, bye-bye.
Thank you.